What's going on, Guardians? It's Tizzle here, and in this video I am showcasing the most unkillable build in all of Destiny 2. I'm not even joking that with just a little bit of smart play you will never die with this build, even in Grandmasters. You can tank all kinds of damage in GMs, allowing you to easily aggro for your team or push into absurd situations to get revives. If you are newer to GMs and looking for a build to start with, then go with this. The build revolves around the exotic Titan arms Stronghold. They have the exotic perch Clenched Fist, which reads maximizes guard stats on equipped swords. You take reduced damage while blocking with a sword. Rapidly damaging targets after blocking shots with a sword grants restoration for a duration determined by the number of shots blocked. So there is a bit of a learning curve with this exotic. Basically, as you block shots, you get stacks of perfect guard, and this goes up to 100. And at 100 stacks, you can get 16 seconds of restoration. The fewer stacks you have, the less restoration duration you will get. And a really important thing to know is that when you have restoration, you do not gain stacks of perfect guard. So when your restoration is close to running out, you want to start blocking again so you can build it up and reproc resto. The Destiny Data Compendium gives percentages on how much damage resistance you get while blocking, and let's just say it's a ton. I was able to tank some absurd damage in GMs, including the 6 Shrieker Void projectiles in the Europa Battleground. Not only do I tank it, but it barely even tickles me. I then walk up to 2 Cursed Thralls and they explode on me, and I am not even in red health. And this isn't a Grandmaster. Pretty sure those Void Seekers will 2-shot you normally. So yeah, it's a lot of DR. And let's also talk about Restoration times 2. It's insanely strong. You can out-heal almost anything with it. Here you can see me on the boss in the Master Presage mission just tanking his fire like it's nothing. And that fire normally melts you extremely quickly. I also have Woven Mail in this clip for even more survivability and damage resistance. But the point still stands. Restoration times 2 is extremely powerful. So now that we know how awesome this exotic is, let's create a build to make us the strongest tank in the Destiny universe. So naturally we are on Strand because Strand Titan is extremely broken. And of course we have a sword-based build, so we're going to go with Banner of War. Defeating a target with a melee, finisher, or sword raises a Banner of War that pulses with energy, periodically healing nearby allies and increasing melee and sword damage. This is a 40% melee damage increase and a 10% sword damage increase. Targets defeated by you and nearby allies charge the banner, increasing the speed of its pulses. So as you and nearby allies get kills, it can stack up to 4 stacks of Banner of War, which pulses every second. So it heals you every second. So if you're blocking a ton of damage, you will take a little bit of damage on your health bar, but if you have Banner of War, the health it gives you back will more than make up for the health you are losing. So for the next aspect, we have Into the Fray, where destroying a Tangle or casting your super grants Woven Mail to nearby allies. While you have Woven Mail, your melee regen rate is increased. This is a substantial increase of 400%, and your Tangle pulses 3 times when you destroy it to not only give you Woven Mail, but it also restores a bit of health. Woven Mail is a 55% damage resistance for 10 seconds, so even without Stronghold, Woven Mail helps you survive some crazy stuff in GMs, so this just makes you even more of a tank. Onto Fragments, we have Threat of Warding for even more ways to gain Woven Mail, this time from picking up an Orb of Power. This isn't totally needed, but this build is all about being as tanky as possible, so I like to run this. But as you become more familiar with the build, and you don't have to rely on Woven Mail as much to survive, then you could sub this out. But you do want to have Woven Mail as much as possible for the next fragment, which is Threat of Transmutation. While you have Woven Mail, Weapon Final Blows create a Tangle. This is great because Tangles give us Woven Mail as mentioned, but they also do a few more things that we will get to momentarily. And one of those things is they provide us with melee energy from Threat of Fury. So with Into the Fray we get an increased melee regen charge, but Threat of Fury also just gives us huge chunks of melee energy for damaging combatants with a Tangle. And the melee is super good on Titans. Yes, you will be blocking with your sword a lot, but the Frenzied Blade melee can also sever enemies, which reduces their damage output by 40% when they are severed. And at base, Sever lasts for 10 seconds. So now, the enemies that are already barely hurting you when you are blocking or have Woven Mail will now be dealing 40% less damage after you melee them. So this will also help your teammates survive as well. And lastly, we have Threat of Generation, where dealing damage grants grenade energy. This is nice to help reduce our grenade cooldown. I run Shackle Grenades with this build, as these can stun unstoppable champions, but they are also really nice as you can just quickly chuck them out with your sword out to suspend enemies. Then you and your teammates can go to town on them while they have no way to fight back. So as you can see, this build is all about taking aggro and then incapacitating enemies. If you have played MMOs, then this build is the quintessential tank of Destiny. Even if you don't output all that much damage, you can take aggro and allow your teammates who may have more firepower but less survivability the chance to go ham on enemies. It can be very useful, but that is not to say that you can't deal some pretty good damage yourself. I'm going to go over a few playstyles when we get to the weapons portion, but first I want to look at the mods. First up is the helmet. The most important mod is Heavy Ammo Finder. The biggest downside to this build is not having any sword ammo. You will feel naked and exposed without any heavy, so throw this on. I then run hands on for more super energy on melee kills, and then a siphon mod corresponding to the damage type that I'm running. On the gloves, heavy handed to make an orb from a melee kill, impact induction for more grenade energy when we deal damage with our melee. This is great to run because I already detailed how many melees we can get from Into the Fray and Threat of Fury. So that then allows us to proc impact induction quite frequently so that we can suspend targets very often. And then depending on the shield types and my weapons, I often like to run a shield break charge to get charged with light on shield breaks that match my weapon types. If there are a ton of arc shields for instance, and I have an arc sword, then this works great. If there aren't too many shields, then just run something else here. On the chest, whatever resist you want for survivability. You aren't going to be always blocking with your sword, as you do have to deal damage sometimes, so it is still good to have resist mods. But I do recommend one reserve mod that matches the element of your sword. Like I said, you do not want to be without sword ammo ever, so this will help with that. On the legs, I go with 3 surge mods that correspond to my sword energy type. Though you could go with just 2 of these mods and 1 scavenger mod to keep your sword reserves topped up. And on the class item, run whatever you like. I go with bomber and 2 time dilation mods to extend my surges. And now we get to the weapons. The surge of the activity will largely determine what sword you are going to run. For Solar Surge, I like to run Lament, which can also deal with barrier champs. For Arc, I like Bequest from the Deepstone Crypt raid. And for Void, Crown Splitter is fun, and Falling Guillotine is also a decent option. With Arc, I really like pairing it with Cloud Strike. You can get AoE damage from the sniper, and it gives you a weapon to use at long range. In a close quarters lost sector, I used 4th Horseman when I was 25 power under light to take out champions in 1 stun. You can play around with whatever you like. You can also go with a Strand Sword if you want. Wishender or Quicksilver Storm are also great anti-barrier options. The big thing to remember with this build is do not run out of sword ammo. It's crucial to the entire build. That is another reason I love Cloud Strike. Rapid fire snipers have deep ammo reserves, so it's a great special to run because you can get a lot of mileage out of your special ammo. Conversely, as I mentioned, Quicksilver Storm and Wishender are great for dealing with trash tier adds, and then you can use the sword to aggro and just deal damage to bigger adds. Wishender especially allows you to play safely at a distance when the time calls for it, and then if you do have to get into the fray, you have your sword and strongholds to keep you alive. With your sword, remember to stick to light attacks because if you use your heavy attack, then there's a brief cooldown where you can't block until you get some sword charge back. Unless it is a lone enemy with no other threats around, then just stick to light attacks. Lament recharges slightly differently, so you can kind of get away with it on that, but just play around with the build to get used to it. But if you use a heavy attack surrounded by a big group of adds, then chances are you are going to die once you come out of that. Because like I said, there's about a 1 second window where you can't block with your sword. For artifact mods, there's nothing too crazy here. Rapid Fire Ranger is nice for debuffing targets before whacking them with the sword, and you definitely want elemental munitions to give you ammo for your sword. The rest doesn't really matter and you can run what you like. For build stats, you obviously want 100 resilience for survivability and to really play into the tank role, and after that, I like to run 100 discipline for a quick cooldown on my grapple grenades. And that is pretty much it for the build. I've ran this build in 3 different GMs now, as well as the master versions of the rest of the season's strikes, and I can confidently tell you that it can hold up in every single strike. So give it a try. If you like this build and want to see more helpful Destiny 2 content, then consider subscribing, and leave a like if you enjoyed this video. And lastly, if you are still watching, then thanks for watching to the end. Enjoy being a walking tank, and take care.